Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back for the continuation of our emergency management department hearing today. This is a public safety day. We heard from our 911 and police department earlier this morning, and we're going to be hearing from emergency management to present that presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. For the record, my name is Barrett Lane. I'm the Director of the Office of Emergency Management, and I'm here today to brief you on the Mayor's recommended budget for the 2016 budget season. As noted on the slide, this is at pages F54 through 58 in your budget book.
Thank you.
Before we get into the slide deck, which is actually quite short, let me just, if I could, set the context for the discussion. Everything we do is driven out of our vision and our mission, and the context of this budget comes directly out of that. So I just want to start and then perhaps finish with kind of where we begin and end with this. Our vision is one of resilience. We want to create a resilient City of Minneapolis organization that serves a resilient City of Minneapolis community. And the way we're doing that over the course of our strategic plan is building out capabilities, systems, if you will, within four main mission areas or buckets that we sort our work into. We work in mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And the way we're building this out is we have the objective of building an organization that's capable of being accredited by 2018. So we have national standards and best practices that we're accountable for, and we're intentionally building the systems to those standards as we move along through the program. The goal for doing that is 2018.
Can you help me understand that accreditation process? Who is the accrediting body?
At this point in time, we have a number of options. The one that we would probably go to is something called the Emergency Management Assessment Program, EMAP. They would assess if we wanted them to. To me, it's more a matter of building out the components to that standard than necessarily getting the accreditation. That would be a decision that we would make in the future. That can be several tens of thousands of dollars to get that external seal of good housekeeping. We may or may not want it. Our objective is to build, and that's why in the strategic plan it says we're building something that's accreditable as opposed to necessarily accredited, because I want to reserve the decision to actually make that investment at that time. We may, for that matter, simply ask internal audit to review it. I mean, I would like the feedback. But the idea is, of course, to build this out to objective standards that don't depend on my opinion. NFPA 1600, which is the standard we're using, sort of lays out the elements of what belongs in a emergency management program, and we're simply going down the checklist and building out those capabilities to the indicated standards.
Good.
So within that context, the mayor's budget proposes about $1.81 million for next year between federal grants and general fund resources. In my judgment, for what we need to do next year, that's certainly sufficient resources to get that job done next year. When we talk about the mix of grants and general fund, I just want to put an asterisk on those grants as we have in the past, and just recognize that although we're using this resource as bridge financing, if you will, it's going to get us from where we're at to where we need to go. You know, the long-term outlook on those grants is unknown. Short-term, quite solid. So we don't have to worry about 2016, probably not 2017, but I always want to just have an asterisk there and recognize that we are building capability based on dollars we don't control. So I just want to make sure that we see that issue so that it doesn't surprise somebody in the future. So with that, again, sufficient resources, stable resources, we should be in good shape for next year in the context of this proposal. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm going to walk you through the presentation itself. Here's our organizational chart right now, 6.5 FTEs. We organize ourselves along the lines of the incident command system. What that means is that we work every day in the same way that we would work in the event there's an emergency. So it allows us to scale up and scale back. Everybody already has that methodology in their mind, and there isn't the big lurch between steady state operations and emergency operations. Again, right now, 6.5 FTEs. Here's the year-over-year budget summary between 2015 and 2016. Again, $1.81 million for next year between the general fund and the grants. $55,000 reduction from last year. That's something we can manage within the budget. Again, these grants are stable throughout the period we're looking at here. And really the ratio of grant versus general fund is almost the same year over year. So again, the picture isn't changing very much. We'll walk through our core programs. And again, here's our mission, vision, values once again. The only thing I point out on this slide is within the services provided box, we've tried to list out some of those capabilities that belong in those larger buckets. So if you pick one of these, for instance, threat hazard risk identification, there's a whole federal book about how to do that and to do it according to their standards. So behind each of these capabilities are objective standards that we're enacting and working to meet. So every one of these things should have some type of objective, verifiable outcome associated with it. Between now and we get to 2018, our outcomes are, have we built the capabilities we said this year that we would build? So that's how we're measuring progress year after year. Until we get to that point, we get to 2018, we validate the program, and then what you're going to really have is a validated current service level that meets standards, and then you've got a program where you know that you've covered all your bases, you understand what the costs associated with that are, and you make decisions based on that. So that's the plan between now and 2018. Again, year over year, we're just building out those capabilities and validating them as we go. Here once again is the overview. You can see the general fund, non-general fund not capabilities, but dollars associated with that. Again, the outlook for those grants are stable. I would note that some of the grants that are affecting counties, if you've been talking with any of your county counterparts, they actually got a fairly large cut from the state as far as resources that they've been using for grant-funded activities. That does not impact us or hasn't impacted us yet, fortunately. Most of our funds come from a separate source that has I think a higher level of stability, at least in the short run. So if you've heard that from your county colleagues, that's not something that we're concerned about in 2016 at a very minimum. We don't have any capital requests to bring before you. So with that, I'd be happy to recommend the mayor's budget to you for your consideration and stand for any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Lane. Are there questions? I see Councilmember or Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just curiosity, looking at the grant, the grant, and I apologize. We just had the allocation come through in public safety, and it came through on consent, and I missed it. I told Councilmember Quincy this. So the grant funds then supplement in the early years, and this, that we used to get 10 million, if I remember. I mean, it was really a lot. How has that changed? Obviously, a big decrease, and so we're not buying big pieces of equipment and that kind of thing. But those dollars, then, how do you choose how those grant dollars then are allocated to individual activities within your program?
So the way that happens, Mr. Chair, Council President Johnson, the way we do that is pretty much set by the expectations that the state of Minnesota has for managing these programs. So this really is a three-part relationship from FEMA to the state, Homeland Security, Emergency Management to us. And the FEMA will set grant guidance that varies from year to year, and they will have different emphases from year to year as far as what they as funders want to see. Mm-hmm. The state will then kind of put their imprint on this, and then we're expected to line it up with our strategic plan. So as year over year, as there's been a development of our strategic planning process, there's been, I think, a sharpening of how we assess these projects. There's also been additional expectations put on from the federal government and the state government that this match up to our threat hazard risk assessment, which has been under development. So this has been a process that has, each year is almost unique. Mm-hmm. I mean, it looks the same, but each criteria are more or less a one-off kind of thing. So each year we reassess that. So the general program, however, is that as soon as we get the grant guidance, we share that with interested parties within the city. We go through and sit down with them with the grant guidance. There's a process by which they submit an application. We assess the application based on the grant guidance, the state priorities. The grant we're working with here is actually administered at a regional level. So there's another level of bureaucracy it needs to fit into. So there's all these gates that it has to hit, from the federal level to the state level to the regional level to our level. And, it simply filters some things out. Mm-hmm. So we go through and see if it hits the gates. And if it does, we do the best we can to support programs that are in alignment with our objectives. And if it doesn't, we, have to tell people, sorry, that just didn't make the cut this year.
Mm-hmm. So when you say the challenges, I mean, when you hear from the feds, they might say health is more of a concern this year, or terrorism is more of a concern this year, or whatever. How do they make their whatever is their priority known?
Mr. Chair, Council President, it's in the grant guidance. The grant guidance is a long document that we have to analyze kind of afresh every year. But it's interesting right now, there's another source of limitations. As you know, there's been some move at the federal government to that is concerned with the perceived militarization of the police.
Yes.
And there have been an executive order that is limiting the scope of the stuff that can be bought primarily. So there's another source, another filter, another gate that if you're going to submit an application, and we're duty bound to go and look and see if it matches up to those, and even in the past, maybe it matched. This year, maybe it doesn't. And it's a fresh analysis year over year. Just picking one at random, one year in the grant guidance, they said what they're really interested is the See Something, Say Something campaign. And we put a lot of money in this instance, MPD, into supporting their See Something, Say Something campaign leading up to the All-Star game. So that's one instance where we got a really good match with the guidance that came out. In other examples, for instance, the state has been very clear that, well, let me back up. What the federal government and the state government want to see is the development of what they're calling complete capabilities. And they look at it, do you have a plan? Do you have an organization? Do you have training? Do you have equipping? And do you exercise it? They want that whole thing to be addressed. And the state recently has been saying, look, we see a lot of equipment being bought, but we don't see the training and exercising that's putting that equipment in place. Okay, you emergency management directors go out and make sure that training and exercising is prioritized before we go out and buy more stuff. So that's the kind of directions we end up trying to implement year over year.
What about rail safety? Has that been something that's been brought forward lately in a higher volume than previous?
Mr. Chair, Council President, it's obviously in the mix. We haven't got the grant guidance for next year yet.
So
we're always working a year behind.
Oh, okay.
So the grant dollars that we are accepting now, the planning process and the decisions were made last spring.
Okay.
So this spring we'll kick off the next grant guidance, and then there'll be a 6 or 8 month process where everybody signs off on it, and the money will not flow again until 6 months after that. So that's one of the reasons why this grant is fairly stable. And normally, as you know, I would be concerned about building core service on the back of grants. This one's fairly stable, and not to say that it's guaranteed forever, because as you know, we're on the back side of this grant curve. That does give me some pause. But if we look at it as bridge financing, which is the way I look at it, and we keep our eye on the fact that there's some risk involved in that, I think it's an acceptable thing to do. But ultimately, we're in a position where we're going to have to basically just take the grant guidance, implement it, and we get an 18-month grant period. That between that and the long lead time to actually getting the grant money in place would give us a long time to figure out that, in fact, gosh, we've been eliminated from this grant. Now we got to do something about it. So it gives us a fair amount of lead time, but it's a long process to actually get to yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you. Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council President had mentioned the Urban Area Security Initiative grant for 2015. And is that grant counted for the 2016 recommended funding non-general, or is that separate completely?
Mr. Mr. Chair, Council Member, that is the only grant that we're managing, right? Well,
Okay.
we have a $30,000 grant that is a $30,000 grant. So that is $30,000 of that $1 million that you see. The rest of it is all UASI money.
Okay. Okay.
So, and again, just to be clear, that urban area security initiative money is administered at the urban area level, which is, I believe, a 10 county, 2 city collaboration that has to have its own investment justifications, that has to have its own filters, that has to have its own threat hazard risk assessment. And there's another filter against which you have to kind of match up our agenda with the regional agenda, with the state agenda, with the federal agenda. So that's one of the ground root hazards, if you will, of working through that system.
Okay. And the Urban Area Security Initiative grant, I mean, that's $990,000. And you talked about the $30,000 that was separate from that.
Correct. That's called Emergency Management Performance Grant. That's actually the grant that's being impacted for counties significantly. That's a pass-through grant that comes through the state of Minnesota. The state of Minnesota takes some dollars associated with that grant, and they pass through the rest. Since their budgets have been strapped, they're now passing through less. And this is, a lesson for the longer-term tails associated with the grant funding decision. They're now finding their operational capabilities impacted because, of course, the grants have been reduced. So it is somewhat of a cautionary tale.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, one last question. Mr. Lamb, with regards to your office, it says your current FTE is 6.5. So we're at 6.5, right? I mean, we're not below, we're right at 6.5 right now, right?
Currently, we are at 6.5.
Okay. Wonderful.
Thank you for that
clarification. Mr. Chair, I mean, in all candor, Council Member, it's going to take more than 6.5 people to put on this program. So, we've discussed additional hiring with city coordinators. So I don't expect 16.5 FTEs to meet our objective of getting accredited. It's not going to be 500 either. So, what we're trying to do is right size this within the budget that we've been given and proceed basically FTE by FTE and make sure that we have a solid business case for the mission that each of those FTEs are going to have. But right now, the finance section chief, well, all these section chiefs probably have at least 2 persons worth of work. That doesn't mean they're going to get two helpers each. That we probably can't afford. But we do have to look at, the future of, how we're going to land this capability in a credible way. And again, all I'm doing is trying to build this out to national standards. This is not necessarily really isn't my opinion at all. I've just, I have the instructions and I'm implementing them.
Good. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify. So when we're looking at the 2016 recommended funding, we have the general fund and then the $1 million non-general fund. So this grant that Councilmember Yang was just talking about, that's not new money to this program. Is that what's got the non-general fund appropriation?
It's essentially it's new to the being applied to 2016, if you put it that way. But
That's right.
It's already in process. It's money that's in flight,
Okay.
if you will, and it's money for which decisions have already been made.
Okay.
Yes.
Very good. I just wanted to make sure that was on track. Are there any other questions, comments from council members on this presentation? Not seeing anything. Thank you very much, Mr. Lane, for this work and for your presentation.
Mr. Chair, council members, thank you for your time.
Good. We'll take a brief pause here as we wait for the fire department to come in and do their transition to their slides.
Chief?
Hi, Beard. How you doing?
I'm well. Good. All right. I don't know. You have yours. All right. All right. Thanks. You bet.
Good afternoon, Chief Friedel. Before we begin your presentation, I just wanted to introduce the council members who have joined us for this afternoon session. Councilmember Gordon, Councilmember Reich, Johnson, Yang, Council President Johnson, Council Member Goodman, Fry, and Palmisano. So thank you for joining us today. This is the public hearing, or the department hearing on fire department, fire service, as the 2016 mayor's recommended budget. So Chief Friedel, welcome and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Quincy. I appreciate that. And thank you, council members and also committee members for allowing me to come up and present on the 2016 mayor's recommended budget. Appreciate that opportunity. I will be more than happy to answer questions as we go along, or there'll be probably pauses in the middle of that presentation. You may have some questions. I'll be glad to answer those questions. I'd like to start out by just quickly going through the presentation I put together using the template that we were supplied. Rather than the first picture talks about the department organization and org chart, rather than go through all those boxes that kind of define our business lines and what we do, I'd like to introduce some of the people that do all the work within those boxes. I think it's very important. Without those folks, I certainly couldn't, we couldn't have achieved what we have so far in the department. So I think it's very important to recognize them. And I'll start to my right with Finance Director Luke Scardilli. And to my closest left is my new Assistant Chief, Brian Tyner. He's going to take the place of Assistant Chief Sheree Penn. He will be officially the Assistant Chief of Administration as of January 1st. And next to Brian is our Community Outreach Officer. That's Cassidy Anderson, very busy person. And next to her is our Deputy Chief of Administration, Melanie Rucker. And next to Melanie is everybody's familiar with Erica Prosser. She's assisting with coordinating a lot of our community programs we have going in our school systems, which I'll talk about today. And next to Erica is John Klepp, is our Deputy Chief of Training. And back in the very back row, she's trying to hide back there, is our new HR generalist, Krista Wilson, who does a very, very good job of coordinating our relationships with HR, working through some alternative hiring processes that we're working on right now. She's been a welcome addition to our team, and I thank HR for sharing her with us.
We had another white shirt join us, who's out for a call.
And the last one, that's Deputy Chief Todd White. Todd is a Deputy Chief of Operations. Obviously, he's working today in charge of all the operations going on presently in the city. So he may end up having to step out, but he's one of the three Deputy Chiefs who work 24-hour shifts, work very hard, and take care of the day-to-day operations of the department out in the station. So really appreciate the work. Appreciate all the support of my staff and also my firefighters out in the stations.
Let's talk about those guys.
I would love to talk about those folks. Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Lutovsky has joined us as well.
There we go. On my budget summary, I'm gonna go quickly through this presentation. Our budget summary, we actually include three main programs. We broke it down to three programs in the things that we provide in our budget. And it's fire suppression, training and recruitment, and community risk reduction and outreach. We have some enhancements that have been included in the budget that I will talk about in future slides. But we've had an increase from 2015 to 2016 of about 3.4% in our budget. I will quickly go through our core programs, starting with fire suppression, EMS, and technical rescue. Obviously, that first program is probably the most important program we have. It's sort of the meat and potatoes, what we really do. It requires a lot of people with very multiple functions in terms of training and their ability to effectively respond to very diverse types of responses that we have today. It's challenging in the sense for the service that we provide in fire response, emergency medical services, hazardous materials response, including response to weapons of mass destruction, prevention education. Our crews do a very effective job with working with Cassidy in pushing that educational piece out to the community, and also a community outreach program. We talk about some of the goals and values of each of our programs. I know that I've heard other department heads talk about the goals and values of their departments and the values and goals that they have. I think, we have checked the boxes and the numerous boxes or boxes within these different programs, but I quite honestly have to say that I think each one of our programs in some way touch every goal and value that the city has. I think that, we could probably argue that at some point they have an impact across the board on both the goals and values all the way across the board of the city, and I think it's very, very important. Some of the charts and graphs we've included, I wanted to talk a little bit about our response time, the NFPA targets, both in 5 minutes or less, and also our response time for 14 firefighters on scene within 9 minutes and 20 seconds. As you know, we've done a study in the past and over the years that the response to emergency events in 5 minutes or less is a very, very stringent standard a national standard. It's very, very difficult for most departments to achieve that goal. I think that we have consistently showed an effective response time to getting companies on scene within 5 minutes. I think we're at a 90 percentile or 80 percentile right now. I believe that is very, very good compared to when you consider how busy this department is. We are a very, very busy department. Our crews are running a lot. We have a lot of people and crews who have to substitute for each other, which makes for longer response times, which is a little bit challenging. So I think in terms of that, that's a very good number to have, is around 80%. We like to be 90, and we'll always try to strive to achieve that, but it is going to be very, very challenging. The chart below that on 14 firefighters on scene within 9 minutes and 20 seconds is one that I'm certainly very proud of. We are able to maintain and meet that national standard 90.5% of the time. We believe in our department to front load our staffing. When it comes to structure fires, we send a lot of additional crews on these responses to assist us, not only meeting the standard, but to put as many assets towards these different types of events, hoping to minimize the expansion of these events to go to multiple alarm situation, which require a lot more resources. So if we can respond quickly, put a lot of resources towards the response to these different types of events, we can minimize the size of the events, and it helps us to maintain our NFPA target in terms of meeting the standard, but it also eliminates or minimizes the impact of larger events. On the next page, I'm sorry, wrong page here, flip this one over. On the two maps we have, on the map on your left is a response time at 5 minutes or less in 2014. The map on your right is response time at 5 minutes or less in 2015. It's nice to see the color changes that we've been able to achieve this year by taking a lot more of the red off the right side map in 2015 compared to 14. We've made a vast improvement in responding to those tougher areas to get to within the city. I think the areas that the core areas of the city, which require a lot of our responses in those certain areas, we're in the green in those areas, so we're getting there very quickly. I think we're getting there very efficiently, and I think we're providing very, very good service to all parts of the city. And now we're getting a total emergency calls by type. This is a breakdown of the different types of alarms and runs that we have within the department. Last year we totaled at around a little over 40,000 total runs last year. I think we are going to exceed 42,000 events this year in terms of response. And so you think about our apparatus are going out of the station 42,000 different times throughout the year. As you can see the impact that has in arriving at all these incidents within 5 minutes or less, because you do have companies that are going to start substituting with each other with the demand for services that we now have. And that is just going to continue to escalate. And so we are going to have to be creative in our response models and continue to look at that to see what kind of changes we have to make to effectively manage and ensure that we can provide a quality and effective service. Training and recruitment is our second major program that we have, and it's very, very important. Our training and recruitment, our program, it's a building block for our department. It's where we work on the issues of diversity, what we have in our department, which we're very, very proud of. And some of the services provided within that is greater potential career opportunities, which in our EMS Pathways program, our Explorer program, and also internal and external collaboration and some cross-disciplinary issues, which I'm going to talk about in future slides. And also, I have to mention here, we're developing an alternative hiring process within our department, working very closely with HR and developing that process so we can maintain and some of the diversity that we do have in this department, which is very challenging as we move forward. One thing I would like to comment on in terms of our diversity, we had a visit from a chief from Australia about 12 days ago in our department. And she had been doing some research in Australia about diversity or diversifying their department in the part of Australia that they were from. And she found in that research that she had conducted that the Minneapolis Fire Department was very high on a national level in terms of the United States as the diversity that we have. And so it was sort of nice to have her come to this city and sit and talk to us about the diversity that we have within our department. She was able to go out and talk to some of our female officers that we have on staff and also female firefighters that are out on the stations. And I asked her to go out and make an honest assessment and come back and sort of give me her reaction to the pulse of what's going on with the department. So it's interesting to see, how far we've come, the challenges that people still have, and the effectiveness that we really truly have. We're not where we want to be. A lot of our diversity, some of our more senior female firefighters are getting close to retirement age. They're part of that attrition bubble. And to maintain those levels of diversity is going to be very, very challenging for us, and something that we take very near and dear to our heart. It's important for us to be diverse. It's important for us to mirror this community we serve, and we're going to continue to work very hard to try to do that. So it's one of those things that I just want to kind of brag about a little bit. I thought it was kind of nice that somebody in Australia read about Minneapolis, Minnesota, and their diversity. I thought that's pretty neat. So, training and recruitment, again, it's very important. I think it aligns very nicely to our goals and values. And there on top, it talks about the adopted budget of 2015 and the mayor's recommended budget for 2016. Moving on to our enhancements. This is where I'm going to spend some time talking about the enhancements that were included in the budget, which I really appreciate, because these are programs that I think are really core to us being succeeding in the future and setting up this department in a position that we can maintain diversity, that we can be a very effective operation and department within the city by providing some opportunity for a lot of our youth in this community. I think it's important that we focus on that. That's one thing I wanted to do when I came back as fire chief, and we're finally on our way to trying to achieve some of that now. And included in our